Hi everybody. This episode is brought to you by My Will to Live. It just came back. On this episode of Sam Makes a List, I will preface with a trigger warning. It's a list of how I knew I was miscarrying, and the only reason I'm sharing this is because I think it might be helpful. If you're a fan of this channel, you know that in my last video I was sitting in this exact same spot, and I'm not too proud to reveal how the sausage is made. I'm recording back to back. I'm 33 years old. I bought this on my 33rd birthday. Do you think that's inappropriate? I wanted to share this because I've gotten a lot of questions about it on my TikTok. This isn't going to be an emotional video. This happened to me in May. It is now January. Also, I'm currently pregnant again. So sick. Belief-wise, I really think that we get the baby that we're supposed to get. My husband was born after his mom had a miscarriage at 10 weeks. My best friend Annie was born after her mom had a miscarriage, also pretty late. People in my life wouldn't be here if there weren't a couple miscarriages along the way. Do what you will with that. I don't know if it's a sore subject, but maybe ask around. Maybe a few people you know wouldn't be around if there wasn't a miscarriage beforehand. One thing I've learned since miscarrying is that almost everyone's had one. Say you had a miscarriage. Well, don't say it unless you've had one. It is insane how many DMs and whatever I got from people that just don't share that information. Fair enough. That's your own business if you don't want to share it. I shared it because I thought it might be helpful to some people because I could not believe how long it took for anyone to tell me what the heck was going on. So I found out I was pregnant on March 20th, 2024, which was sick. Started trying right after I got married. I tried for 3 months, got pregnant in March. Dope. Good and bad news. Great news because yahoo, I'm pregnant. Bad news because what the hell, I'm pregnant. All my friends are getting married this summer. I'm going on a bachelorette party trip to Vegas. Also, aren't I just a baby? I can't be pregnant. I just little. So I was kind of like, wait a sec. This maybe happened too soon, even though the 2 months I was trying before, I was like, why aren't I pregnant? Something's wrong. It's normal for it to take up to a year. I didn't know that. I didn't know anything. Sorry, no one tells you this crap. People make it seem like it's a really intuitive process, and I found it to be quite the opposite. So I find out I'm pregnant. I'm like, cool, but also what the hell am I going to do about Las Vegas? And that in itself kind of made me think, am I ready for this? Everything's going well. I have one appointment with my doctor, get my HCG numbers drawn. They were in the hundreds, but I found out very early. I think my first HCG draw was actually 40 or something. Later, it went up to 2 something. It was climbing, but it was definitely slow, but I didn't know anything. So I was like, okay, whatever. This all looks like appropriate business. Not a freaking doctor. I went to Vegas for this bachelorette party at 6 weeks. You could not have found a less grateful to be pregnant person than me. I almost needed this miscarriage as a kick in the fucking head. I was going to Vegas I can't believe this. I cannot believe I'm going to Vegas and I'm pregnant and it's a bachelorette party and we're in our 30s. We all have money. Also, everybody's gonna start getting pregnant now. This is it. Why did you get pregnant in March? Why wouldn't you get pregnant in May? That way, you could have enjoyed this bachelorette party and gotten loose. What are you doing? So on the plane ride to Vegas, I'm obviously Googling, can I have a sip of a margarita? I did have a sip of a margarita. I've also had sips of margaritas in this pregnancy. I haven't had a full margarita, but I've had little sips. That's neither here nor there. And that's not why I miscarried. Actually, you know what? I'm side tangent. Do you know how many people on TikTok doesn't know they're pregnant and then they have a stomach ache, then they go to the doctor and a healthy baby comes out? If you have any guilt, just look up mystery pregnancy, undiagnosed pregnancy, phantom pregnancy. I forget what it's called, but just look that up on TikTok and alleviate yourself from the guilt of anything you think you might have done, because miscarriages are 90% of the time or 80% of the time, I forget one of them, bundle of cells that were never gonna grow. It was never gonna work, and there's nothing you could have done differently. And like I said, probably making room for whatever baby you're supposed to have. But I digress. In Vegas, and I'm like, ugh, I'm exhausted, but I'm not sick. What I would give for a cigarette or a vape. I am at a pool bar. I was at Tao. Oh my God. It was cool to know that I could do it though. And I have all these videos of me dancing at Tao. The people in Vegas, I told, because I party. I know. It would be immediately obvious if I was not drinking and smoking, especially given Vegas is my favorite place in the world. I'm not very cultured. I'm just a good time. Sorry, guys. I get home. The only kind of symptoms I have at this point are I'm tired. Monday after I got home, I had my 7-week ultrasound where you're supposed to see the heartbeat or hopefully see the heartbeat. Doesn't happen for everyone. Some people don't see it till 8 weeks, whatever. Day that I went, my boobs weren't hurting anymore and my boobs really hurt. hurt, like the whole Vegas trip. I forgot to say that. I was bouncing around in a bikini. That might have been worse than the miscarriage itself. When I took my bikini top off, when I got back to the hotel, I feel like these things have been beaten black and blue. I go to the ultrasound, and guys, I feel like ultrasound techs really are making their own rules. Like, some of them are like, I'm not going to tell you shit. And some of them will randomly tell you an annoyingly cryptic amount. She's like doing it, and my husband's not allowed in the room, and they're all like kind of weird about, like, sometimes my husband's allowed in, sometimes they're not. My husband wasn't allowed in the room. She's like, I'm going to do it, and then we'll call him in, whatever. She calls him in, and she just goes, no baby. And I'm like, no baby? And she's like, I can't see a baby, very small, very small. I'm like, is that okay? And it's annoying because they can't really tell you anything. They're not allowed to tell you anything, but I'm like, I wish you didn't say no baby then. Obviously, she knows that I'm expecting to maybe see the heartbeat, so she has to say, like, I can't find that. Sometimes, like, you're just measuring behind, it says you're 5 weeks and 6 days, and I was supposed to be 7 weeks, 2 days or something, or 7 weeks and 1 day. And I'm like, okay, and she's like, this is your dating ultrasound. It's just to date how far along you actually are. I'm like, okay. I leave there. I'm sobbing the whole walk home. Like, I'm like, that can't be right. So I walk home, I'm sobbing. I'm like, oh my God, this might be the karma part of this, even though I don't really believe in karma, so don't worry. Don't worry if you also did something stupid like this. But before we went to Vegas, I literally said to the bride, my friend Annie, I was like, if I go to Vegas sober and miscarry after, I'm gonna be so pissed. Do I regret saying that? Not really. I was so pissed. Also, like, devastated. I was like, what the hell? I barely got to know you. So at this point, I don't know that I'm miscarrying, right? So I call my doctor the next day, and my doctor's like, well, that doesn't really mean anything. Like, dating ultrasounds, we don't trust that you guys, like, knew exactly when everything was going down. So a dating ultrasound, it could totally vary by a week. That's not that unusual. And I was like, okay. He's like, yeah, so you just go back when you're actually 7 weeks, according to the dating ultrasound, and you hope to see a heartbeat then. And I'm like, cool. I was satiated for a moment at that point because I called my husband. My husband's like, okay, so you don't know what you're talking about. I'm like, yeah, maybe. However, I really knew the day I was ovulating, I knew that I tested every single day after a certain point. So I knew that the positive I got on March 20th was the first possible day it could have been positive. I didn't wait till after my period. So I knew exactly kind of when everything went down, and being a week off really didn't make sense to me, but I kind of just put myself in denial. I'm like, you know what? Why am I worrying about this? I don't know. Doctors know better than me, like, whatever. So then I did something a little unhinged. 4 days later or something, I took my same ultrasound requisition sheet and went to a different clinic. It was a walk-in clinic. So I just handed them the sheet. I want to see if there's been any progress in the last like 5 days. So she does it, and it's a dating ultrasound again. I see the baby, and there's a little heartbeat. Oh, fuck, it grew. So I'm like, okay, maybe I've been tripping. My doctor was right, and cool. The heartbeat, it was exactly 90 beats per minute, which is low, but some people have babies with heartbeats that are 90 beats per minute. It's like not unheard of, but it's not great. They want to see over 100 beats per minute at that point. I took a picture of the screen after, and the crown to rump length was shorter than it should have been at 6 weeks. So I'm like, maybe this is just one of those slow babies. My doctor calls me, and he's like, did you get another ultrasound? I'm like, yeah, honey, I am tripping over here. Like, what am I supposed to do? Just wait and see what the fuck happens? Short answer, yes. I mean, there's a heartbeat. The heartbeat is low, but whatever. Bigger problem is you have 2 subchronic hematomas, which aren't a huge deal. They're like blood blisters inside your uterus, and if they rupture, then something can happen, and blah, 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 depending on where they are. I'm like, okay. So every kind of piece of information I got kind of like made me think, like, this really isn't going to work out. Another thing just to note is that, like, my due date was November 30th. I cannot see me doing this. Like, I don't see me having a baby in November or December. I just, like, didn't see it for myself. I don't know. Do what you will with that. Next week was going to be 7.5, 8 weeks. But I, at this point, am now spiraling because the more I'm doing the math, the more I'm realizing it is absolutely 8 weeks that I'm at. They're saying 6 or something. I know it's 8. I know when I had sex. I know when I tested. I did ovulation tests. I know. So before we went for the final ultrasound, I got my HCG numbers pulled, and they had gone down. I will say at this point, I was 8 weeks pregnant, and they were 4,000 total. To put in perspective, obviously everybody's different, and it's a huge spectrum, so you shouldn't stress yourself out about this. But to put it in perspective, 8 weeks this pregnancy, I was at like over 15,000. So it's like, it just depends. Having a successful pregnancy pregnancy after and seeing the contrast between the two. For example, I was violently ill this pregnancy. If I knew that I get violently ill when I'm pregnant, I would have known right away when I was at Tao Beach Club shaking my tits, no problem. Anyway, so after I saw that number go down, I poured myself a drink. I was at home. I got the test results. Our ultrasound was the next day. I poured myself a vodka soda, and Joe was like, but you don't know. I'm like, I am sick of pretending I don't know. Everybody's trying to be optimistic, and the optimism is actually making me sad. I'd rather come to terms with this and move on, especially since I have 4 girl cousins. 3 of them have miscarried. I'm trying to make it so this isn't something that should be completely out of left field, and it's not. 20% of pregnancies, they think maybe even more if you don't know when you got pregnant, maybe even up to 25% of pregnancies can end in miscarriage. And that's not to scare you. Lots of times nothing goes wrong. There's a lot of people that have multiple pregnancies. There's people that have 4 or 5 kids and they've never miscarried once. Once I kind of saw all the signs, I was kind of saying to my husband, like, this isn't crazy. I'm not crazy for thinking this didn't work. The odds are actually relatively decent that they might not. Let's stop kidding ourselves. We can kid ourselves with all these things that we've never heard of, but one thing I know for sure is that an HCG number should never go down. The second it went down, I was like, this goose is cooked. Sorry, that was a brutal way of saying it, but I was just like, this can't possibly work. Like, my doctor calls me about the HCG result and he's like, okay, well, we'll keep an eye on it. And I just said, okay, listen, I'm already having a vodka soda. You don't need to say we'll keep an eye on it. Just tell me what the fuck is going on. Cause this was a 2-week period of going back and forth. Should I be happy? Should I not? Like, should I tell people? Should I not? He was like, okay, like, it doesn't look good. We don't like to see the number going down. Like, you never know. And I was like, that's all I needed to hear, because you never know. But I've also never heard of that. I've never heard of the number going down and then shooting back up. I got off the phone with my doctor. Joe and I called our parents, let them know what was going on. I was like, I'm going to miscarry. I don't know when, but like, whatever. Devastated for us, but they were like, yeah, it happens. Like, Joe's mom, like I said, has had a miscarriage, and that's why Joe's here. Next day, we had our ultrasound. This was like such a calming day because I was hoping to God that there wasn't a heartbeat, because I didn't want to elongate the process further. If the baby was still growing or doing something when I kind of knew it was like futile, that would kind of depress me. And also, I didn't want my doctor to call me back and say, like, just hang on a little longer, because the waiting is the worst part. I told her before I got in the bed, because I didn't want her to feel uncomfortable, because I'm an empath. I was like, just so you know, we're expecting to see no heartbeat here, so do not fear that is what the result is. Anyway, she was like, yeah, I really tried to look for it. I couldn't find it. At this point, Joe actually did a little cry, because I think he was kind of like in denial, and he was kind of like, well, you don't know for sure. You don't know for sure. But like, I had come to terms with this probably a week or 2 before that. So I was like, I am good with this. I'm at peace with this so that we can try again. I want this process to I want to have a more positive experience. Like, we were able to get pregnant. Let's just fucking focus on that. I was just like, okay, if this is what it is, then let's just accept that. So, because the sooner we accept it, the sooner we can be zen. My new concern was, okay, well, now when does this thing come out? All of the things I've read about it are like, it could take a month, it could take a week. And I'm like, I can't walk around with this inside me for a month. I know this sounds bad, but that idea grossed me out. Like, I know a lot of people think of this as a baby, and in some ways I did, but in a lot of ways I thought of it as now just kind of like tissue, like, ew. Like, I was looking into booking a DNC because, again, I wanted to try and get pregnant again. And I think one thing the miscarriage really gave me was perspective. I was really rattled when I first got pregnant, and after my miscarriage I was like, okay, wait, I really wanted that. Actually, I can't be walking around like this for a month, because then by the time it comes out, and by the time I get my period back, and then by the time we can try again, and blah blah blah. So I was looking into booking a DNC, and it was just like more of a difficult process than I thought. I could not book at a hospital unless the baby was alive, or unless it was a viable pregnancy. I'd have to go to a separate women's clinic for that, which I thought was kind of weird, but maybe it's like a resources thing. Clinics I was looking at, it was a few weeks away, so I'm like, okay, why don't I just take 5, see how this all like shakes out, and then if in like a week or 2 there's been no movement, then I'll revisit booking a DNC at a clinic. That weekend was my friend's bachelorette party, another bachelorette party, and I was going to her house, which was like in a different town, so I just kind of like put it out of my mind. I'm like, all right, you're going to this bachelorette party, you can drink at this one. I was running around, I was grabbing shit, like whatever. And that morning I was getting in the car, and I think because I put it out of my mind, I was just like, all right, like I was fully focused on something else. I went to the bathroom and I wiped, and there was like blood. It looked like period blood. It wasn't like crazy, but it was like period amount. Oh my God, thank God. This 5 days after the ultrasound. So I was like, amazing. I don't need to even interfere. Like, this is just going to happen by itself. The actual process, you can skip this part if you don't want to hear about it, but I'll just tell you if you are interested, or if you know you're about to miscarry and you're wondering how it is. For me, I was relieved when I started miscarrying because it just meant that I was closer to trying and having the baby that I wanted to have and like would eventually have. So it was a step closer for me. So when I started miscarrying naturally, I was actually relieved. But anyway, I went to the bachelorette party. I had some drinks. I was wearing a diaper, had some mild cramping, but like kind of like period level discomfort. Day after the bachelorette party, I was lying in bed and I realized like I cannot drive home. Like there's no way I can drive home. Husband was in New York, the girl's husband's bachelor party. So he was like in New York and he's on the plane and I'm like, you have to drive here to this other town when you get off the plane and get me. Like, I don't know. I cannot be here. I was staying at his parents' place, which was great. Thank God I was with my in-laws who are amazing. So they were like making me mashed potatoes and stuff, which isn't a must for a miscarriage, by the way, but honestly recommended. Gatorade, I got mashed potato. Okay, whatever. Actually, why am I giving you a list of random shit I got? Whatever. That's my comfort shit. Okay? That's mine. So he gets off the plane. He comes and gets me. He brings me home that night. Thank God I got home that night because the next morning the actual tissue started to pass. And like, it wasn't really uncomfortable. It was definitely painful. Like the cramps were painful. At this point, I was taking Advil and it wasn't like anything too crazy. But what was coming out was crazy. It was a lot. Every time I stood up, like it was like bought like just really massive pads and I had to change them. I'm not kidding. Every time I peed, basically, I would just change my pad because I was like, this is crazy. I wasn't bleeding through the pads. It was more that a bunch of tissue was coming out into the pads. So I was like, okay, I'm not gonna fucking sit in this. That day was okay. It wasn't horrible. It was definitely uncomfortable, but it wasn't horrible. On the third day, and again, like, I don't know what a fetus looks like or anything. So my doctor was saying like, did you pass the fetus? I'm like, I think so. Like a lot of shit is coming out. So I just thought, okay, it must be done because of all this stuff that's come out. Like it just must be. So then the third night, I wake up in the middle of the night and I have never given birth. So I can't speak to if this is true, but I cannot wait to actually give birth so I can compare these feelings. I woke up and I'm like, this is a contraction. Like it was 5 a.m. My legs, like it was everywhere. It was down my legs and it felt like this wheezing feeling. It was fucking crazy. I was like, this is what a contraction. I know in my bones that's what this is. I knew that it was not how I felt. Like the days before that were just kind of period cramp feelings. And this was like, holy shit. I didn't even know what to do with myself. I just lied there. Joe was sleeping. I was like, I think I got out of bed. I took a couple Advil and then I went and sat on the toilet because contractions made me feel like I had to maybe shit or something. So I was like, okay, I'm just going to sit on the toilet. Eventually it just kind of subsided. I went back to sleep. I was like, okay, that was weird. Next day I had an appointment at the hospital to like make sure all the tissue came out. So I went there, got an ultrasound. I felt kind of good. So I'm like, you know what? I'm going to walk home. And I just walked more than I had certainly in the last few days while I was just lying there bleeding into a diaper. And I got home and then I got this crazy cramp again. And I was like, what the fuck? I sat on the toilet. This thing came out and I'm like, that's it. Like it was a sack. Like it was, I just knew that was it. Everything else that had come out in the 4 days before was not that. I don't know if it's because it was attached or whatever. It's interesting that I didn't have contractions for the other tissue, but I had contractions for that one thing and it wasn't big. After that, I think I had some mild residual bleeding, no more cramps really. And I got my period back exactly a month or 5 weeks later. I got my period back and we started trying again 2 weeks after that. Stressful part about that whole experience was not knowing what was going on. All in all, it was not as bad as I thought. Physical process of it was not as bad as some people have described it as, to me anyway. But emotionally, yeah, it's definitely kind of fucked up, especially afterwards, and especially when you're trying to get pregnant afterwards and it takes a little bit. Because like, yeah, some people get pregnant their next cycle, some people it takes forever and you're like, the fuck, I want what I just had. And then people around you start getting pregnant and then you start tripping. That I should make a whole different video on the psychology behind all that, but I just wanted to share that experience. You will come out the other side. I totally get it. Like you feel fucked. Like there's no other way to put it. It's like such a fucked feeling. There should be a little bit of comfort in like, this is nothing you could have prevented. This baby was never meant to survive. It couldn't have possibly survived. You are now one step closer to meeting the baby that you were always meant to. Pretend I never had that miscarriage. It just took me this long to get pregnant for the baby I'm supposed to meet. I know this wasn't really a list, which is kind of my shtick on this channel. I've done it twice. But yeah, if you guys have any questions, I'm happy to answer them in the comments below. And I wish all of you well. I wish all of you, you know, like great, happy pregnancies and beautiful babies or rainbow babies. I'm really excited to meet my rainbow baby because now I'm like, yo, you were the one that I was meant to hang with. That last one was a dud. Those are the kinds of jokes I make behind closed doors. I'm not sure how chill you guys are. We would make a lot of miscarriage jokes. Sound off in the comments if you're chill. Maybe I'll put them in my next video. I don't want to freaking trigger anyone. All right, guys, thanks so much for watching. If you haven't already, please like and subscribe. This is going to be one of my last videos on pregnancy because I make lists on other things, relationships, TV shows. Hey, how about you fucking tell me what I should make a list of? Because I don't know, but I want to keep making lists. I want to keep making videos. I want to be a YouTube ho so bad. And love y'all. Mwah.